one of the concepts around the budget last night was this whole concept of productivity. And Jim Chalmers was very quick to hone in on that. And what I'd like to do is open up to all of you, from my perspective, because I think if we think about business and productivity, it just feels like there's a bigger issue that's sitting underneath this budget. And if we look at what Jim Chalmers introduced last night, there were actually some sensible business initiatives announced last night. And those initiatives included, the instant asset write-off up to 20 grand. So in theory, a small business today up to a turnover of $10 million. Is that right, Anthony?
I
think yes, that's right.
Yep.
So they could write off up to $20,000 with one asset, which is cool. So they don't have to go through the depreciation, which is efficient. The government came up with some incredible estimate of saving 3,600 hours per year. I don't know where on earth they got that one from, but apparently that was going to do that. There was also an innovation support, and there was a better loss carry back provision as well. So if you're incurring capital or income losses and all that kind of stuff, you can bring them forward and offset against, if you're incurring profit losses and you had previous gains the year before, you could actually claim some of that back, these are all good things. I guess the question, when we look at what the government did, they've had all these meetings around productivity. They've spoken about the importance about why we need to become more productive. But yet, when you look at the budget papers, our productivity today is languishing at 1.75%. And if you look at the papers themselves, it's actually not forecast to rise. So I guess, Pat, if I can go to you, mate, just if we look at what the government's trying to do and all this focus on productivity that they're talking about, do you think this budget's going to help productivity, or is this budget more about distributing the pie?
Probably the latter. We're just, distributing it around, because you said those things. They brought in these measures, but we all know those measures will do some, but productivity growth comes from, encouraging investment, rewarding risk-taking, improving efficiency, removing bureaucracy. Like, these are the things that need businesses to grow and produce productivity, So I think it's just more redistributing the pie, if anything, because people are not getting rewarded for taking risks, not getting rewarded for employing people, so they just basically retreat. So and then productivity retreats.
Yeah, look, I'm finding myself agreeing with you a lot on that point, because when I look at what the government was trying to do and the big focus, and when you listen to Jim Chalmers speak a lot, it's about the productivity thing, and you kind of go, well, none of this has done that, and you, by taking money out of whatever you're doing from that point of view, that's distributing. It's not actually adding to the pie stuff. I guess, Lisa, just extending on that, how careful does the government need to be around removing incentives from the system? So when you think about that in the context of what the government's trying to do, and don't get me wrong, there's other things that they're doing which make sense, but when you look at that, does the government need to be careful that it doesn't take out too much incentive?
Certainly, we're not in a strong enough economic position to be removing incentives. And, these are some minor improvements perhaps in certain areas. But for me, the other part of productivity is also preventing waste, right? Waste of time, waste of money. And I don't just mean AI drafting our emails or something, but it's also, the popular one with the electorate, spending on enforcement and supervision in things like aged care and NDIS. Sadly, there's this perception out there that it's magic government money and greedy people, reaching in to charge extra on their hourly rates and these sorts of things. It's almost like it's a pastime in Australia to find ways to, rip off programs and justify it because everyone else is doing it. So I do think there's a bit of a societal step up needed there in terms of wasting money and effectively stealing from taxpayers, stealing from each other. There were also some other, minor opportunities presented in the budget, 86 million for fraud detection for the ATO and the super system. So that's a welcome element. 260 million over the next 4 years to continue to fund the National Anti-Corruption Commission, which looks at federal politics level. and bureaucrats, 17.8 million over 4 years for enforcement in the area of managed investment schemes to prevent things like First Guardian and Shield Master. So, they're not exciting areas, but that also helps prevent people losing money and money and time being wasted. And I think just those two words, reducing waste, is a real winner with the electorate.
Couldn't agree with you more on that point. Couldn't agree with you more. Marco, I guess a question for you, and if we think about what the government's trying to do from that point of view, and and correct me if you disagree, but if people feel that there's little reward by taking risk and building businesses and creating wealth, so extending on what Pat was saying before, do they stop actually trying? And do they actually just turn around and go, what's the point? I've had enough.
Yeah, there's certainly an element of that, and that's one of the big risks that we face. And we've talked about the redistribution of this pie, and but we haven't really spoken about how we're going to grow the pie. And I think that's something that's sort of been lost here. And and for me, the irony is that all these people that have built all this amazing amounts of wealth and everything, they didn't seem to have a problem with productivity over the years. The problem is right now. Our productivity over the last shorter period of time has been an absolute disaster. But we don't seem to be sort of solving for that. I am a little bit concerned about removing the incentives to sort of have a crack and actually try and do something, be entrepreneurial and the like. And that you think about the world that we live in now. It's very global. You look at young people today; they don't have homes because they can't get into homes. We've realised that from where we're at and what a lot of the direction of the budget is at. They don't need to be in Australia, right? So they don't need to start aggressive startups and the like in Australia. They can do that anywhere in the world. And if the incentives are better elsewhere, guess what? That is exactly what's going to happen. We've seen that with our universities. Simple things like all of a sudden we had this issue with we didn't have the income coming in from foreign students in the universities. All of a sudden research gets cut. Well, guess what? I'm going to go and do my research in Boston because Massachusetts is happy to pay for my work. And who benefits from that? It's certainly not Australia in the end. Yeah. You guys know I love a story, and I think it's time for a bit of a story. This reminds me of the Croatian coast, middle of summer, bloke with his fishing rod on the side of the beach. Yeah, and he's fishing away, and a German entrepreneur pulls up in his massive, 150-foot yacht, and he gets off the boat. He walks down the pier, and he walks up to the guy fishing. He goes, "What are you doing, mate?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's a bit of fishing, And he said, "Oh yeah, do you catch many fish?" He goes, "I'll catch a couple of fish, for myself and my partner. We usually." Have lunch. And the guy says to him, the German guy goes, "Well, have you considered maybe picking up a boat or something?" And he said, "Well, what for?" And he said, "You can go out a little bit further, maybe catch some more fish, and, you can maybe sell some of the fish to the market." And the guy's thinking about it, and he goes, "Yeah, well, what would I do after that?" He said, "Well, maybe, get a bigger boat, get multiple boats, you can, start fishing, plenty of fish out of the water, maybe go into manufacturing, distribution, employ hundreds of people and, go global, and the guy's sitting there going, "Oh yeah." And he said, "And what would I do after that?" And he said, "Well, then you sell your business and you make a whole heap of money and, you can relax and enjoy yourself." And the guy looks at him, he goes, "Mate, what do you think I'm doing right now?" He goes, "Why would I even go there?" I get the sense that there is a lot of people on the edge of the water with their fishing rods at the moment. And they're sort of going, "Why would I make the effort if you don't give me the incentive?"
Yeah, I love the joke. I reckon I've heard it 1,000 times. My dad's raised it many a times too. And look, I do share some of your concern there, Mirko, in the sense that even on the trust side, the capital gain side, there is no question. If you actually look at the data does point to the fact that the minute the capital gains discount was introduced way back in 2000, property prices went through the roof. And, and I think Alan Kohler wrote a brilliant paper. There's a quarterly essay, I think late last year, that we actually spoke on in Pulse from that point of view. If you haven't had a read through it. The data is clear. When capital gains was discounted, you saw the property market go through the roof. So that I kind of accept and go, that's kind of cool. The negative gearing, you know, the fact that we were able to claim it against all the incomes, you kind of go, well, okay, that seemed to be a bit crazy from that end. But the trust one, I do wonder about that, because you just kind of sit there and go, well, okay, most family businesses and most small businesses who are running through trusts, they don't get many free kicks. They're paying tax at marginal rates, they're doing all those sort of things. And the ability to be able to distribute flexibility with some flexibility from that point of view, provided a kicker. And I think Pat and I were talking about this earlier this morning. It's really only for the short term, because the kids are 18 to 21, 22 for a very short period of time, then they're out working anyway. So it's not like this was an endless pool of money from that end. And the problem there is when you go and do this, you know, the poor business owner or the poor entrepreneur or the poor startup is just sitting there going, well, what's the point? And you're right, Mirko, they do look around and they go, well, you know, if there's opportunities in India, if there's opportunities in Portugal, if there's opportunities in Spain, one, we know the climate is just as good as it is here in Australia. Two, we know probably the food's better, without being rude. We know the wine's definitely good. That we know. And if you've got a fetish for a Negroni every once in a while, you know, going to Europe, you can't go wrong. So you've got all these sorts of issues, and you kind of go, these guys are in competition, yeah? So it's one of those things where I think the Australian government just really needs to open up their eyes and go, there's a bigger game at play here. And putting their hands in your pocket continuously does feel a little bit awkward.